Hi,
Welcome,
Ronnie. Hello,
everyone.
Peter.
Hey, Richard.
We're going to wait just 2 more minutes because lots of people are streaming in right now.
I'm going to watch out here.
Oh, here's Sol. Great.
What a strange.
Yeah, everybody, make sure you're muted so we don't get ambient sound. Okay, I think that we'll start. Welcome to this session of Book Talk. It's a program we've been doing at the Center for Book Arts since before the pandemic. At that time, it was in person, and then for a long time, it was on Zoom. And we learned on Zoom that we could have people from all over the world, which is wonderful. And today, I'm so delighted that our guest is artist binder Kathy Abbott from the UK, who will talk to us about tomorrow's present, an international. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my God. Tomorrow's past. How many times did I look that up? Um, it's an international collective whose members come from Argentina, Italy, and the UK. And it was founded in 2003 by Kathy, Tracy Rowledge, and Jen Lindsay. The books which are chosen are works that are not valuable enough to warrant conservation, but valuable enough to provide an opportunity for artist binders to envision a new life for them using modern sensibilities, and the results are just stunning. So we will first have a presentation from Kathy, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A.
Well, thank you very much for joining me this evening. And thank you to the Centre for Book Arts for inviting me to give this book talk. I'm delighted. So I shall start. I'm going to share my screen so you can see. Oh, sharing is not turned on now, it says. Hello, someone help me?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Oh, I see. Okay, great.
Let me see if I can make you. Yeah, you can go now.
Okay, great. Out of my way. Right, here we go. So, tomorrow's past. This is Rebinding Antiquarian Books with Modern Sensibility. Tomorrow's Past is the name of an international collective of like-minded bookbinders that make modern conservation bindings for antiquarian books. The bookbinders have been, with the group, has been me, Kathy Abbott, Carmencio Origi from Italy, Cristina Balbiano d'Aramengo, from Italy, Schoenevrod from France, Charles Gledhill from the UK, Peter Jones from the UK, Katinka Kois from the Netherlands, Jen Lindsay from the UK, Sol Bora from Argentina, and Tracy Rowledge from the UK. All of the group, and there's been other people as have been invited over the years. All of the collective work professionally as bookbinders and book conservators, and some as teachers, and that we all handle work of different types and periods in our everyday practice. And the fusion of the experience with the historical awareness, along with modern conservation materials, techniques, and skill, has produced work that is radical in its simplicity, ingenuity, and truth to materials. The formation of the group arose after a discussion about where we had noticed an increasing amount of bindings where bookbinders had put their style of traditional bookbinding on anything and everything, rather than carefully considering what structure might be best for the book to meet the physical needs of that particular book. We talked about the growing separation between creative bookbinders and book conservators and restorers, and how this wasn't aiding the development of ways to think about and rebind old books. We thought that it'd be interesting to create a fusion between creative bookbinding and conservation binding. And then we were invited to give an exhibition of this sort of work at the 2003 Antiquarian Book Fair in Olympia, London. It's a massive book fair. The exhibition, we needed a title for it, and we took it from... Hang on a minute, what's going on here? Oh, that's how. We took it from a quote by the master bookbinder Edgar Mansfield, and it said, "Surely it is better to create tomorrow's past than to repeat today's." We thought this was the perfect essence of what we were trying to say. We think that it makes us think that why go on making books based on the past, copying outdated methods and conventions, instead of making books based on now, applying current knowledge and practice with a modern sensibility. So in 2003, the birth of our group, Tomorrow's Past. The ethos of the work of Tomorrow's Past is largely born from the frustration and disappointment of seeing and having to repair books like this. They're badly bound books from the 19th century onwards. These are commonly in shiny, over-polished, over-paired, thin leather with 5 raised bands. They're often bound too tightly, they don't open well, which causes stress on the pages. The books, this is the most bizarre thing, the books are often sewn with sawn-in cords to make a smooth spine, and then false bands are placed on the back to make it look like raised bands. The paper is then weakened from the sawing in procedure, and then glue creeps into the gutter of those sort of bindings, and it causes more, because of the big fold from the sawing procedure, and it just causes more and more problems. The frustrating thing is that this style is one that bookbinders and book dealers and collectors are really attracted to. And actually, I think that a lot of book people think this is what we make on a daily basis. But as modern day bookbinders, it's not with our awareness of conservation practices, I don't think this is a style we should be propagating. What is very interesting to me is that throughout the history of bookbinding, in different periods, books would be bound in the style of the day they were rebound, not the style of when the book was printed. So, for example, a 17th century book that was rebound in the 18th century would be bound in the style of the 18th century, not the 17th century, using 18th century ornaments, artistic references from architecture and fashion, all brought to the binding of their books of that day. But since the beginning of the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, when this style was the fashion, when this came into fashion, we've got stuck. We've stayed in this one style for all this time, and with the exception of design bindings and artist books, I think it would be really difficult for people if an alien landed and saw these sort of bookbinders to judge what we were like, what our artistic references are, what our fashion choices are, what our homes are like, because this isn't a representation of who we are now. Carmencha Origi, one of our members, said it's rather like us all walking around in crinolines right now. And I think that's really interesting, a really interesting point. The binders from tomorrow's past all have experience with working with antiquarian books, and we use conservation practices and materials in our daily work. I worked at an antiquarian book dealers for almost 10 years called Bernard Quaritch. It's one of the biggest in the UK and prestigious. And I've seen and worked and handled books. I've been very fortunate to work on books through every century you can think of. And I've seen many books which are badly bound, but I've seen many books that are in really perfect condition, that are bound more simply. And what I found really interesting from working there was that when we sent books to book fairs, they would go in a trunk and off they'd go to all over the world. When they returned, books that I would have to repair because they got damaged in transit were only ever the leather bindings, never the paper bindings, the vellum bindings. They came back as perfectly as they left. And that made me think, why are we keeping on binding in this way when actually there may be a better way of doing things? Of course, those sort of paper bindings and vellum bindings, the paper bindings are on smaller volumes, but we have many examples of large vellum bindings, for example, or alum tawed skins that would just stay perfectly. So I'm going to show you a few of those. Of that, and these were all from the Bernard Quaritch that where I worked. So top left are original vellum bindings from the 16th century. And on the right, there's a tackative binding. And then underneath, the one at the bottom of the pile, I love that book because it's just a blank notebook. It is empty. It's just blank pages for someone to fill. And the bottom, number 3, are carta rustica, which means rough papers. These are Italian rough paper bindings. And look at them. They have all been to book fairs and been manhandled because they're not the gentlest of people, the antiquarian book dealers with books. And these came back in absolutely mint condition. Top left are my absolute favourite, the decorated paper bindings from the 18th century, and there's gold paper bindings and carta decorati bindings, and the one on the right is an 18th century paper binding with originally silver tooling on it, but it's gone tarnished over the time. And the bottom is another simple carta rustica, sort of a maths table sort of book. So it's important that you know from tomorrow's past that we don't rebind the books that we exhibit just for the hell of it. We choose books that are damaged or broken. The boards are off, or there are no boards at all, or they might be pamphlets that have been disbound from a larger volume. But they are all in need of rebinding and saving in some way. Before we do anything, we handle the books and we think a long time. That's the biggest time spent, is thinking. We're looking at them, examining them. And then we make maquettes of the binding structure that we think would best meet the needs of the book. So there isn't a blanket approach that we have this great idea and then we put it on something. We try to make work without ego, so that we let the book is king, the book is the most important thing. We are just the vehicles to make them sing, to make them comfortable. We see them rather like old people that need care and tenderness, and we want them to not suffer and struggle. We use only conservation grade materials. We try to make fully reversible bindings, quite often non-adhesive bindings if possible. We only used homemade adhesives or completely reversible adhesives, unbleached linens. Unbleached linen threads, and we use original sewing holes. We don't mess too much with them. We use all of our knowledge and experience as binders to do the right thing for the books. And but we're not trying to make pastiches of those carta decorati books or anything like that. Those books that were great from their travels into book fairs. We were not trying to make pastiches. We're trying to adopt those principles of those structures and make them something of the 21st century, so that people can have a reference of who we are as 21st century bookbinders. So our debut exhibition was in 2003, and Tomorrow's Past was only ever supposed to be a one-off exhibition. That was it. It was just a one-off thing. But we went to the Antiquarian book fair in London, and these are the books. Well, actually, we went there from 2003 to 2008 before I show you the books. The first year was horrible. It was really horrible because we were by the gents' toilets. It wasn't a very nice location. People were incredulous looking at our things, thinking, what's that? They didn't understand what we were doing. People wouldn't come near. They were frightened of it, and they were creeping around, and people that were brave would ask us, did we have a book on chess or something random? But people just didn't get it. So we had to come back the next year to try again. And then people did slowly start to see what we were doing. So here is a selection of books that we made from 2003 to 2008 from the Antiquarian Book Fair in Olympia, London. So we have top left is a wooden boarded binding from Peter Jones, sewn on carbon fibre rods. And if you look to the right, it's the same book, and you see how beautiful the opening is, because it just pivots on those carbon rods. Carbon rods are inert, so there's nothing bad touching the book inside. The one below is Carmen chose what she called the croissant binding, because if you can see the little tackets on the spine, they look like croissants. But inside, the opening is absolutely perfectly flat, and there are vellum tabs to keep the sewing thread from tearing into the holes. And these two are made by Katinka Kois from the Netherlands. These were commissioned by National Library of Netherlands or Amsterdam, I think, and they wanted a more cost-effective way of making, but beautiful way of making conservation bindings. So she did this for them, and with her homemade paste papers. One of mine, top left, one of Tracy's top right, and then the bottom one is an invited binder of the first year, which was Nesta Davis, and that's a book about beads and buttons. And the top right, number 2, is by Shun Everard, and these are her, staple bindings. So she invented this. Lots of people have used this, but this was her invention. And the staples are made from pure metal, so gold or platinum, and it's gold wire or platinum wire that she puts through little tiny wood or acrylic lozenges and drills through them to make staples. And the covers are weighted with carbon fiber rods within the leather, so that the covers plop down and stay down. The bottom one is by Carmencho Origi, and I don't know if you can see on the right hand side, the cover is just clipped on, and if you look into the gutter, if you can see in the gutter of that book, it's a solid gold pin clip just holding it, so you just move them off and then the cover's off. So it's like a temporary binding, but a beautiful temporary binding. A 14th century folio from the Bible from Peter Jones with vellum and carbon fiber rods. And this is the bottom one is by Tracy Rowledge, and it's hand-coloured handmade paper. And this is it started from Carmencho Origi's cross-structure binding, and then she developed it as reverse cross-structure. And you can see how it opens there. And she tooled it in like a palladium gold mix. It's called, oh, my brain's gone empty, Kaplan. Top right, Tracy Rowledge, and these bindings are 4 volumes, and each one is tooled in Kaplan, the palladium leaf, but then the one stripe is in gold for volume 1, 2 stripes in gold for volume 2, and so on. And the bottom is by Eva Zili, who was one of the early binders from Hungary. Jen Lindsay, and on the right hand side you can see what it was originally. So that's its original binding. That leather rotted away. There was nothing left, or very little left, and she's just reused the original boards, re-sewed it onto cords, and infilled the loss of the boards with wood veneer. Bottom is Peter Jones. Peter Jones is a carpenter, so that's why his books often have wood. And this is a 13th century manuscript. And it's just to hold it and display it and look at it. Charles Gledhill on the left. He works a lot with antiquarian book dealers, so he didn't want to freak them out too much by going crazy radical. So this was his first one for us, so he kept it quite accessible for them. And on the right is Christina Balbiano Daramengo's Waiting binding, based on a structure by Heidi Kyle. The book inside was in very good condition, but it needed protecting in some way, so it's just held within this little paper wrapper and nicely tooled, so it's quite beautiful. There is Heidi Kyle from the top. She was an invited binder one year in Tyvek, and the one on the right, top right, is by Peter Jones. It's Hopper's Measurer, and it's quite brilliant because it is the spine is his old school ruler that he sawed into three, so it has perfect articulation. It opens, and then a vintage tape measure and wooden boards. Clementia Righi and then Jen Lindsay with calligraphy, which Jen commissioned a calligrapher to write the title down the foredge. More. The bottom right is interesting. This was originally a stab sewn structure. It was an alphabet book, and it had staples in there. So Christina removed them and made the alphabet book a massive concertina or an accordion. And if you take that peg out, you can open it right out as an enormous accordion, or you can use the pin and the pages roll over the pin. It's a very clever structure. It works beautifully. And this is really quite big, this book. It's must be a foot wide. We had a good time at the Antiquarian Book Fair in the end. They got it by the end of it. We were getting commissions and people were buying our work, so we finally got there. But we started in 2008 exhibiting at the Paris Book Fair, and I gave a talk at the lecture at the Society of Bookbinders conference in Warwick, so we had an exhibition there to go. I was talking about Tomorrow's Past, so it went with that. The top left are just receipts for a repair of an umbrella, and they're just little. Commentary calls them untouchable bindings, so they're just sort of little pins that hold them there. The top right is very interesting. This is Charles Gledhill, and the material looks very difficult to understand what the material is, and I would almost like to set a challenge. Does anyone know what it is? But I shall give you the answer straight away. It's actually mylar, or melanex, we call it here, but mylar, and it's lined with handmade paper. So you can see the sewing and the structure through the mylar on the spine, and then it's got handmade paper on the inside and the outside, and Jen Lindsay at the bottom in alum tawed, natural alum tawed skin. Top left was actually a really big book, big and heavy book that was a commission for Christina, and so she made this cross structure binding in leather. So this was a leather binding, but it's completely lined with handmade paper. Top right is one of mine, and I like to tell this story because it's one of those one-off things that will never happen in my life again. I had a sheet of handmade paper. I made a rubber stamp. It's about a farmer's boy, so I wanted to make it like an ear of corn. I just randomly decorated, well, I gridded it out, but I decorated the entire sheet of paper and then just made the binding. And if I'd have planned it, I couldn't have done it better. But the spine the decoration on the spine is perfectly in the middle of the spine. It starts and ends on the foredge in exactly the same place, and head to tail also. It's just one of those freak things that will never ever happen in my life again, that it just worked. Bottom is Katinka with alum tawed skin and native dyed skin, and Peter Jones with a mixture of vellum and wood veneer. Top left, Tracy's and Jen's that year, both leaving boards, really the original boards to do their thing, so quite beautiful. But Tracy tooled very, I don't know if you can see in the top left, there's gold tooling across the board at the top, and it continues meandering across the spine, so they work individually or as a group. Carmencha on the right, she had a tunnel book, and she made this house, which is a concertina, and the cover wraps around it, so you just have one thing that you take around with you. It's like a box theatre. And Jen at the bottom, they are the pieces that had fallen off, and she put these leather triangles to protect the original slips, the cords, and a new spine on it, but otherwise left completely as she found it. This is Peter Jones. This is lovely. It's the book you can see absolutely, and it's got acrylic boards and vellum spine and wooden panels, but you can see, you don't even have to open the cover, you can see what's inside. It opens really, really well. Another staple binding from Shum, one of mine at the bottom, which I decorated the paper to go with the original marbling of the edge, which is pale pink and greys, and just hand decorated papers. This is Peter Jones with a sort of rolling spine, sort of loose spine that the book just rolls across this very soft alum tawed leather. Alum tawed is a completely archival leather. Its process of being made, the way it's made, makes it archival. So it's always a good choice for these bindings. Top left, Tracy Roledge, hand decorated paper. And then the bottom, I just wanted to talk about this one because one of my friends is a kintsugi. One of my close friends is kintsugi restorer. She trained in Japan with the master kintsugi and urushi master anyway. So she'd been doing this sort of work. I have a few pieces where I've chipped a bowl or something, and now I've got these beautiful things. And I got this book, and it was in absolutely dreadful state, and it needed resewing, and I had to sew it on new thongs. I won't go into the structure because it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done, and I work on some very tricky projects, but it looks like nothing, but it really was. I had to hand curve needles at different curves because the paste downs were hooked around the first and last section, so to close it was an impossibility without damaging it. So very difficult. Anyway, the bits that were missing, I wanted to highlight in that kintsugi way. So rather than repair it invisibly, to celebrate what's been lost. So you can just see the gold peeking out, and also near the sewing holes where the alum tawed skin is. I hand coloured the alum tawed sewing songs. In 2013, it was our 10-year anniversary. We didn't plan to be that long, but there we are. I'm just going to get to that page in case I forget to say something. We wanted to really acknowledge this 10 years because we hadn't planned it, and here we were, and it was just going from strength to strength. So we wanted to show the work out of a book-related location. We wanted a different location. So there is this beautiful designer furniture product design store in Covent Garden in the centre of London called the Aram Store. And at the top, they have a gallery that we've been to a couple of exhibitions there, and it's a beautiful space. So we approached them with this idea, which is very different to the things they showed. And we had a meeting, and they agreed because the exhibition space has to be to show contemporary makers who demonstrate strong design qualities in their work. They saw what we were trying to do, and it was incredible. So it gave us an opportunity to connect with a whole new community, not just book people. And the exhibition ran from November to January, so it was all over the Christmas period. So it was really busy, and we got loads of press coverage, and it was great. It was the first time we were actually curated. The gallerists curated the exhibition, so we each had a vitrine. I'm going to show you in a second how it looked. And we had to choose a conceptual object that influenced the work that we made for this exhibition. There was a handling table with the maquettes that we'd made so people could handle and get an idea of what we were doing. And we all were interviewed, and that interview was in each of our vitrines. And our conceptual objects range from kimono to a bicycle to a fold-up ruler, some music. There was all sorts going on. This is the gallery, and this was it was called Readable Objects. And so you can see what it was like. The space is a very kind of warehousey, industrial looking place, so the vitrines were just perfect. And there's the maquette table, and you can see some of the conceptual objects. It was beautiful. And this is the work that was made for it. Top left is Tracy Rowledge's. I better get a wriggle on, seeing the time. With natural boards and a hand-tooled vellum spine, so that it with moon gold, which echoed the colour of the boards. Jen Lindsay with a Dutch gilt paper. And a vellum binding by Charles Gledhill. And there's mine in the bottom right, and that one caused a lot of controversy, and I'm not surprised, because I went again with the kintsugi idea, but instead of gold, I went with this really, really vivid blue. But this really vivid blue was in the marbling on the edges from itself. So they're the original boards. And then I hand decorated a spine piece that just hand drew an element of that gold tooling. So it had a relationship to the spine. But it didn't need resewing, but the boards were off. So I had to find a way of getting the boards attached without resewing the whole thing. In 2017, we had a few years off between the Aram because we just needed to regroup, because that was a big exhibition. And then we applied to exhibit at Codex Book Fair in the USA, and that's just been wonderful. The reception at Codex has been fantastic, and I met Ronnie there, so that was always fortuitous. And this is where we mainly show our work now. So this is the top left is a beautiful thing by Carmencho Rigi, made from vintage ribbons that she embedded into handmade paper by gluing and pressing really hard. It is exquisite. Tracy Rowledge hand decorated stencil binding that inside the book it has little oval vignettes, so that echoes that. Charles Gledhill with his mylar covers again, and this beautiful, you can't see the sewing on this book, but it is something else, a really intricate sewing technique that I have no idea how he does it. And this one on the right is Katinka Kois by another structure that I don't really understand. I tried undoing it to have a look at it, but it's really intriguing. What's really nice, I must say, about Tomorrow's Past also is that we all work in different countries, and we don't talk about each other, what we're doing. We just set them, this is the exhibition date, and then the mailman comes and we open up these treasures and see what we've got. And it's wonderful. It's really exciting when we see what's been delivered. But sometimes it's really odd. We all seem to have a sort of theme that year, but it's completely random. We didn't ever discuss it. But this is how we work. So there's no collaboration. Christina Balbiano using the original board fragments and then a hand-decorated fabric slotted spine. Sian Everard with her staple bindings. This is a book on the alphabet, so it's tooled in lots of different letters from the alphabet. A mottled vellum from me, and Peter Jones, which had these kind of clips. The covers were clipped onto with these metal sort of rivet things that were through the vellum spine. And Jen Lindsay, top left. Suzanne Schmalgruber, who's from Switzerland. She was invited that year, using the original boards and a hand-decorated spine. And also, for the first time, Sol Ribora from Argentina has become one of our mainstays. This was her first one with us that year. Top left is beautiful binding by Sol Ribora with layered Japanese tissue. One from Carmen Chorigi, which is vellum, hand-decorated vellum, with little tiny, I suppose, tackets at the back, little rings. And the bottom is, again, the laminated mylar bindings of Charles Gledhill, but with marble paper under it to play with old and new. Hand decorated binding from Tracy Rowledge, and that's based on the saw horse. Her father's a carpenter. This is again Hoppus's practical measurer. Her father was a carpenter, and his saw horse had all these amazing marks, so she took influence from that. And the bottom one is really lovely, Peter Jones. This book is almost unhandleable. Handleable, is that a word? You can't handle it. It's so fragile, but he gave it mylar covers, so you can see it. It's a book on animal husbandry. It's a very strange little book. He finds very quirky books. And then it's got a acrylic or perspex tube at the back, where everything clips on it, sort of clips it in place, but it's not sewn or held in any other way other than this sort of clip. But it's a lovely thing. It enables you to hold it and handle it without damaging it further. Genevra, another staple binding, and bottom right is one of mine. I'm using mine to reference because it's me talking, but if another one of our members talked, it will be their references. So this one, it had very decorative marbled paste downs and fly leaves, and I wanted to play with that to bring it on the outside. So I hand painted a sort of trompe l'oeil onto unbleached cotton to mirror that, so that you can see it just on the right. You can just see all of that painting to see sort of 2 millimeters of it poking out between the vellum spine. And the vellum spine is tooled with little circular device, which is on the boards of the original. So it has a relationship with it. The top left is one of mine, and it had this. Again, I'm highlighting things missing with gold, but this one was interesting to me because someone had branded it with CG, their initials, and I thought, isn't that interesting that who we are as 21st century people, that, not me necessarily, but a lot of people are obsessed with branding. So I tooled the spine with CG, like the front, but in the style of the Chanel logo. So CG back to back, just to be playful. And then all the board edges, everywhere I've repaired is got 23.5 carat gold leaf spine, 23.5 carat gold leaf, and the M band that I sewed on the top has even got a real gold thread. Tracy's at the bottom, beautiful book on tailoring, and she has echoed with a traditional roll, decorative roll. She has made those shapes of the tailor's pattern by repeating that decorative roll in carbon. Sol is really interested in maps and cartography, so this book she has made. She decorated her own cover with maps. It's really lovely, and others. And this is the latest work from the 2024 book fair. So Tracy Rowledge, this book was in pretty good condition, didn't need rebinding. As I said, we don't rebind things for the sake of it. They have to be broken. But she, what we traditionally do in our work as book conservators, quite often we put a mylar wrapper around a book to protect it on its way, which she discovered you can gold tool mylar. So she decorated mylar and made a mylar wrapper for this book, dust wrapper, but it's decorative, so you can take its fancy coat off or put it on. It's lovely. Jen Lindsay on right, and again Peter Jones with mylar and on a carbon fibre rod. Solrabora on top left, and mine top right. I'm going to talk about that one in a minute. I've got a case study. And the next at the bottom one, Charles Gledhill with his gold mylar, gilded mylar. So I thought it'd be interesting for you to see that book I've just shown you how it was. So this is how I found it. It's a tiny, tiny book. It's only 11 centimeters tall. It's absolutely minuscule. It's a dictionary. So it was well used, but the covers had red rot. Red rot is this degradation of leather. It was just rotten. You couldn't touch it without being covered in dust. And you can see the burn on the inside of the board on the second slide. And the title page had corner missing, quite a lot of the spine edge missing. So, and the spine was really rotten as well. So this had to be completely rebound. The sewing was broken in several places, so it needed re-sewing using the original sewing holes and a thread that was very similar in weight and colour. I had to wash this book. I had to wash it and resize it, and then infill the missing area. You can see on the bottom left where I've infilled it with Japanese tissue, and it's exactly the same weight, so it flexes and engineers in the same way as the rest of the book. Sewn on to pack sewing on alum towed cords, and then I hand gilded handmade paper spine, and then this is the finished binding, and this is natural vellum with its veins. That's the veins of the vellum. And it's with the pack sewing, you can turn it absolutely inside out. It is super flexible, and there's a British £1 coin to see in scale, the size of it. I'm nearly there, nearly at the end. Tomorrow's past commissions. I've been very fortunate to be commissioned to make work for tomorrow's past to make work in our tomorrow's past concept, which is really lovely. That's like it's an honor to do that. So the top left was a cloth binding, oh god, my brain's gone empty. Decorated cloth. So it's been, I can't think of the word. Embossed cloth binding, but it had no spine, and I thought all that was left were its little turn-ins. What was left of the spine, there was nothing else when the client gave it to me. But I thought, weren't they beautiful, the little turn-ins that nobody gets to see because they're in the spine of the book that nobody sees ever? So I decorated some unbleached linen with gold that matches the sort of scuffed nature of the turn-ins and made them the star of the show. They're on the outside where they usually just get hidden on the inside. Nobody sees them. On the right is a commission, and this book was very quirky because it's the Imitation of Christ, but it was highlighted in bright pink and bright blue pencil in the naughty bits, or the other bits. I think the pink bits were the naughty bits. Very strange book. And so I made my own sewing cords from twisted sewing thread, dyed sewing thread, and the pattern of those lacing in points matches the blocks of the printing inside and exactly where the colour of the lined bits, and it's a vellum spine. The bottom one was a Culpepper's Complete Herbalist, a book on herbalist medicine, and it had lots of lovely, beautiful illustrations of botanical plants. So and if you can see just on the right, originally somebody rested an iron on the front cover. You got an iron burn on there from some time in its life. And it had no spine, so I thought the client was giving it to me to do a reback, a traditional reback, but she actually said, no, I want you to do something in the Tomorrow's Past vein. So I copied one of the botanical illustrations painted onto vellum so that the inside references, or the outside references the inside. I think that's all. Yes. So that's where we are so far. We continue to make, we continue to get together. Now it seems to be a thing for codex, but there are exciting things coming, and we're excited to be of that potential, but I can't say what that is yet. So the members have changed over the years that we've been going, but what has remained constant is the integrity from which the work has been made. Making is about thinking as much as it is about doing. As bookbinders, it's essential for us to use our intellect and our lateral thinking, sensitivity to the book, as well as a sensibility to make the best decisions for a book in our care. Think, then act. And as I said, we think a lot. That is the biggest length of time, is the thinking. We employ all that we know to make the best decision for that book. We are the makers, are responsible for any book that is in our care. And the client isn't always right, so it's our job to try and educate and guide them into the best thing for a book in our care. The subject of this lecture is something I'm very passionate about, as are all of our members and of our collective. And I thank you for allowing me to share an aspect of our bookbinding practice that we feel so committed to. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I have a question, and then I want to open it to the group.
Sure.
I'm curious, you said on occasion you invite a binder to participate.
Yes.
And I wonder if that's a group decision or an individual's suggestion. And also, does that invitee get to pick the book they work with, or do you suggest one to them?
Right, good questions. It's usually the three founder members, so that's myself, Tracy Rowledge, and Jen Lindsay, but others can suggest people, and they have in the past, have suggested people that might be worth trying. And we've tried people, and then the work's not been quite right. So they've not been asked back, which is, or they've chosen not to exhibit again with us. It's not always us being elitist and snobby. They've sometimes rejected us. But we usually find people that it's a hard combination with Tomorrow's Past, because you need to have an awareness of antiquarian books and their needs, because they're very different needs to a contemporary book. But also people that are used to that and are experimental in structure and creative, and that's a really hard melting pot to get together. But when we see people's work that we like, then we ask. But sometimes people ask us if they can join. So that happened with Sol. Sol was really interested in our work and wanted to join us. So it took a bit of time before we got to a place where it was, mutually agreeable, and that's been that. But no, the binders, none of our founder members have anything to do with the books that are chosen, but we have a set of guidelines and principles that we send to each binder. So we have rules, i.e., you can't change the sewing holes, you can't use coloured threads inside a book, and so on, things like that. We've got rules. So that helps. Everyone has to work within that parameter, but what you come up with is completely your choice.
Okay, just one more thing.
Yeah.
Did each artist decide on the price? I mean, these must be very expensive to produce.
Well, interesting that you should say that. They're actually the thinking is the bit that takes time, but they are much quicker and therefore much cheaper than a fine binding, a design binding. So they are and because they're paper and vellum, they're much cheaper to sell. But in your introduction, it's not quite right. When we first started, the books didn't have any value, but now we try to find books that do have a value, but they have no binding or a broken binding, and then they're more collectible. If we bind a cheap rubbish book like volume 4 off a off a set, just one volume, no one was going to be interested in owning that, really. So we tried to make a book that's worth binding.
Okay, I want to invite everyone else to unmute themselves and feel free to ask Kathy a question.
I'll do my best to answer. No.
Oh, okay. Here's one. Can you talk about your personal process of choosing books to work on in this style?
Yeah. That's really interesting, actually, because we just wrote an article for the new bookbinder, the Designer Bookbinders publication, and we set each of the members of the collective questionnaire on. We all had the same series of questions, and we realized we all have a very different way of approaching it. My approach is that I like a book. Actually, if I stop sharing, I can show you something that I bought in the States. Oh, why can't I get out of my? Can't get out of my stop sharing.
Let me ask Camilla.
Why can't I stop sharing? I can't see anything. Usually if I press escape, that allows me to stop. I can't get my cursor to do anything.
Okay, let me try. Okay, now.
Aha.
Yeah.
Great. So when I was in the States for Codex this year, I found this monster. Look at it. But for me, that's exciting. It is challenging. It is broken so badly. It has this fantastic binding, as you can see, with tape, just tape, and it's in a million pieces. And that I find interesting. The book itself is really nice inside. It's one I've found before, which is Hudibras. It's lovely. So that for me is juicy. I think, oh, lovely. I'm going to enjoy that. So the book has to be worth something. I like ones that are really broken, and this is, just wonderful. It's so horrible. It is magnificent, and this hopefully will be at the next codex in its new guise, whatever that may be. I'm still thinking about it, but it is quite magnificent. Yeah, so I find them. I find that dictionary, the little tiny dictionary. I was just in a antiquarian bookshop, and behind the man sitting there, I saw it, and it was just rotten. And he said, "Oh yeah, it's really worn." And when I looked at it, I thought, "God, that's such a treasure." And I knew I could do something with it. So he was delighted when I told him what it was, and he gave me a very good price on it, much less than it was worth, but because he was interested in the project. I hope that answers something. It just got to be, I just got to see something that I like. It's got to have some value, though.
We have another question.
Yes.
Have the philosophies and techniques you've developed for tomorrow's past trickled into your other work? And are you thinking about the tomorrow's past principles when you're binding a new text or creating a design binding?
Absolutely, 100%. It's a very good question, and it is a philosophy that is over every aspect of my work. My design bindings are conservationally led. I think about the longevity, and my ego is back. It's not about me, it's about letting the book sing. That's how I feel about it. I don't want it to be anyone that knows my work, it's quite quiet, it's quite minimalistic, because I want the book to breathe. I want to be able to let it breathe and let someone discover the essence of what I've found in there. But the principles, the practicalities are in every aspect. I'm a book conservator, so it's in that. And that's fed tomorrow's past. They're mutually, it's a reciprocal thing. My book conservation is fed into tomorrow's past. Tomorrow's past is fed into every other element. So it's in everything I do. I think it's the same from every one of us as members. I think it's not just me. But that answered that.
I don't see any more questions. We have time for more if anybody wants to ask anything.
You can ask anything.
I mean, I think when you first started and you said how long it took in the UK for people to understand what you were doing, I wonder if American audiences are more amenable,
Yes.
or maybe, their understanding of perhaps artist books, make it easier for them to come to what you're doing.
I think the problem is where we've had problems is that is tradition and history. We've got this massive weight on our shoulders about the history of the book and tradition. And the countries that have the strong bookbinding tradition are the ones that have found it the most difficult to accept. I think the New World and also Scandinavian countries, they really understand it, they really get it, they're really appreciative of it. But the traditional houses of bookbinding, if you like, or countries, are Britain, Germany, Italy, France. They're kind of that's the main, they're the traditionalists, and it's just not been an easy journey for us. But something I do want to actually say, while I can, is that this isn't I do restoration for books. I might have to do a pastiche binding from here and there for my clients. So this isn't dogma. This is just offering an alternative way of binding antiquarian books that are suitable for this sort of process. It's not dogmatic. It's not now we must all bind books like this. It's not. It's just an alternative way. The most important thing that we want to stimulate is thinking. Is to stimulate a debate. Let's think about what we're doing as bookbinders. Let's think about it, not just go by what we know, the tradition. I had a very traditional education. I was an apprentice. I went to college. I trained for 8 years to be a bookbinder, and I've been a bookbinder for 35 years. I'm steeped in tradition, but my tradition is my anchor, and then I branch out from it.
I also wonder if people experience the books from your collective in a way as book objects. I mean, I kind of do. And I wonder if people buy the books, thinking they're going to read them, or they just appreciate them as an object.
I think the latter. I think the same as you. I think most people that buy our books buy them because they find them covetable. They find them beautiful.
Mhm.
They're not actually worried about what's inside. Not always the case. Some people have bought things because they're interested in that, and it happens to be in this style of binding. But most people, I would say, find them covetable. They like something about them, but as objects.
Mhm.
But they're fully readable objects. I have one here. I brought one home. This is one of my first ones. This is a book that I made a rubber stamp just from an eraser to be like an Italian printed paper binding. And this is the first clip-on cover binding I did. And it's a book from 1643. And it was just from a pamphlet, and it's been really badly cropped. Somebody has chopped it so close to the margins, sometimes cutting off the look, it's a bit gone there. And they had decorated it in this orange. They quite badly. It's all bled in. That was not me. Just to make that clear, I didn't do that. But it gave me the colour to reference, and it now opens absolutely flat with no strain under it, and there's no adhesive at all on here. So if you want to get it out, you just take it out.
Well, this has been just incredible, as I knew it would be.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh my goodness, wonderful. And I can't wait to see the new work.
Yes, I'm excited. It's so exciting. We love it when the new work comes in. It's like Christmas. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people bring for the next one.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye bye.